coming back to school with me. We could have done it all so easily.
Hi, my name is Craig Thompson Wood, kicking it old school, going all the way back to 1993 to take a look at Once Upon a Time by Atlas Games. So Once Upon a Time says right at the top, actually, Once Upon a Time, the storytelling card game. It's a game where you are telling stories. I think this game would be a good fit for if you're doing a fairy tale unit or study a fairy tale unit, or just students who enjoy fairy tales or want to develop some narrative skills. This is a game that could work for that. Before I get too deep into it, let me take you to the report card and I'll tell you what I think. So looking at the number of players for Once Upon a Time, I will give it an A+. I give it an A+, even though it says it plays between 2 to 6 players, which to me is like normally a B+. But if you're creative with this one, I don't really think there's any reason you couldn't do this as a whole class activity. The fact is that, you know, there's a lot of cards, a lot of different things. So, you know, I would group the students in groups of 2 to 6, but because it's just cards, it could absolutely be done in such a way with the teacher moderator moving around, giving out cards as needed and stuff like that, that you could have the whole class playing at one time. So for the cost of one deck of cards of this, you really could do a whole class activity with it. So for whole class, A+. For learning for Once Upon a Time, I'm going to actually give it an A. I think this is a great game for, you know, as a warm-up activity and teaching about narratives and things like that. Particularly, you know, it just says for 8+, and I guess maybe because I've been teaching in schools with high ESL, ELL populations for such a long time that I find it hard to believe that 8-year-olds could manage this game, have the language necessary. But I think that's just my own bias talking. So by all means, try it. But I think in a game like this, it's just to develop the skills to tell a story, because you're going to be telling the story, you're going to be practicing sort of digging back into your own personal experiences with what stories you've heard, what stories you know, and then just sharing, improvising your own story based out of that, trying to guide it to your own thing. This game is a great introduction into teaching of narratives, particularly for teaching fairy tales, because of all the elements and the things that are in there. Besides, a lot of the stuff deals in the game, it's Once Upon a Time. It's very much driven and focused towards fairy tales. So it's an excellent game for that kind of thing. And I think when writing, a lot of students tend to suffer from writer's block. A lot of adults tend to suffer from writer's block. And one way I've always felt is an effective way to get out of writer's block is to just write. And I know that sounds, you know, counterintuitive, but I mean, it's like, just start writing anything, just you know, and then things will come, things will flow. The same thing here. It's an improv game, and you're just kind of going with it. You're just allowing the ideas to flow out of you without thinking too much about it. You're just trying to, you have an ending which you're trying to steer your story towards, and I'll show you more about that when I take it to the table. But it's just sort of a flowing of the ideas, and just one thing goes to the next. You're trying to get rid of your cards. You have these cards which are going to guide your story and eventually lead to the ending. But so you kind of going that route, and if you get stuck, you always have the option to pass. But the idea is that you want to get rid of your cards, and other students are looking for opportunities to jump in with their own cards to interrupt. And again, I'll show you, this will make more sense when I show you how it's played. But so the idea being then that, you know, as a warm-up activity for any kind of narrative thing, just to get the juices flowing, get the ideas going, get you know, this supplies a lot of ideas and things for the kids too, as they hear each other's things, as they look at the elements and things from the stories in here. And a lot of discussion could happen around this. So to me, this is a great activity for that kind of thing, and that's why I give it the A. For fun, for Once Upon a Time, I'm going to give it a B+. I think that this is, you know, a kind of game where you're getting into a kind of realm of how do you teach this thing in a fun way. So it's going to, I think the students are, again, I'm very biased with this because I'm finding it hard to imagine my students, who I've had for the last 10 or more years, well, most of my career really, you know, I've had a lot of students with in a high ELL, ESL population, so it's hard for me to imagine these kinds of students doing this game. Teaching grade 10, sorry, 10-year-olds in grade 5, it's to me, I would think it for other kids, but a lot of the people on Board Game Geek and stuff seem to think that this game is suitable for 8-year-olds. So I mean, by all means, try it. But I just think that provided that they're capable and able to do it and able to handle it, then I think this is a fun way to learn these kinds of skills. Having the opportunity to just create something on their own, just the improvisation of it, the fact that it's a game, a little bit of competition, and sort of sharing some of the things that happened afterwards as a class, a discussion and things. It creates a whole way to latch things onto the teaching in a very fun, engaging way. And I think that if the students buy into it and the students get into it, I think it could be really great. For time for Once Upon a Time, I'm going to give it an A. There's nothing really to it. I mean, it's two different decks of cards. One deck of cards is all your story elements. The other deck of cards is your happy endings. So just have to give every student gets one card with an ending that they have to try to make by the end of the game. The other element cards, they have a set amount that they want to get rid of, and then once they get rid of all their cards, and then they can end their story, then they have won. So that is it. So it's really, the game says it takes about half an hour, which I think is about accurate. I haven't had a chance to try this one with my students yet, but it's, half an hour is a great time for a game. I mean, because periods for my school anyway tend to run about 40, well, not tend to run it, because periods in my school run 40 minutes. So having a 40-minute period with a game that runs half an hour sounds perfect. A little bit of time for setup and cleanup at the end, and it's all good. And then if you go into a double period, so you can also do some next time, just start talking about some of the things that were there, and the sharing some of the moments and what was something that you enjoyed in the game and things. I would really recommend, if you're going to do it, half hour for the game, but take the time afterwards to engage the students and really sort of tie back into what were some parts of the game that you enjoyed. Tell us about some of the moments in this thing that you thought was particularly interesting, and so on. So just trying to really sort of milk as much as you can out of the game experience. So it's not just play the game and you're done. Use that to launch the learning and to strengthen the learning of it. So so the game itself is very quick and won't take up too much of your time in the setup, cleanup, and play. So then using the other time for the instruction and the real sort of learning. For cost for Once Upon a Time, I'm going to give it an A+. It's, if you can find it, it's going to be about $25 Canadian. And that's so you can always talk to levelup.ca, see if they can get a copy of this in. It is an older game, but there are copies still out there. So do look for this one. If you're, like I said, if you're going to be teaching any kind of narrative units, particularly if you're teaching units around folklore, particularly fairy tales, then I would say that this is a great game to help to develop some of those skills and ideas and things like that. So I think that, and the fact that it can be played for a whole class at once, and then you'll be using this year after year, and the students may want to play it on their own, maybe during an indoor recess or something like that. You're really going to get a lot of use out of this game. So I would even recommend sleeving the cards to just make them last a little bit longer, and then you're really going to get your money's worth out of this game, no questions. So A+ for sure. All right, let me take it to the table and I'll show you how this game is played. So as you're setting up a game of Once Upon a Time storytelling card game, you're going to separate your decks into these two decks. So one has the white border, one has the black border, and these are what you're going to use for your thing. So the ones with the white border here are your Happy Ever After cards. So these are the ones where each student is going to get one of these cards, and it's going to be their ending that they have to try to reach. So they return it to the original owner. So it was transformed back into human form, which proves that a pure heart will always triumph in the end. So he told her that he was the prince, and they lived happily ever after. So lots and lots and lots of potential endings here, and everybody's going to get one, and that's what they're aiming to reach. They're trying to steer their story towards this ending by the end of the game. So I'm just going to set up for a 3-player game here, just to give you a quick, very quick sense of how the game is played. Move these out of the way. So say this is player 1, player 2, and player 3. Okay. So now when you look in here, a 3-player game, it's going to show you for the number of players in each group how many there are going to be. So in a 3-player game, everybody's getting 8 cards. So now these black ones, These are cards with different elements. They tell you what kind of element here at the bottom. So this is a character. So you have parents, you have a place, which is a prison, you know, an aspect, stolen, and so on. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh yeah, and then you're also going to get these interrupt cards. Okay. And so this is going to give you an opportunity to interrupt the storyteller, because the storyteller is going to be telling the story and just discarding cards as they go to try and get rid of all their cards. The point is to get rid of all your cards, and once you've got rid of all your cards, then you've won. Okay, I'm just backing up here, trying to get everybody in there. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So now, in a game, I'm only setting them up like this to show you how the game might look with the cards set up, like, you know, like how the game might play. But everyone would have these in a hand, hidden from the other players. So I'm just saying like this so you can see what my thoughts are and where I'm going with it. So let's just say this player is starting, and they can start their story however they want. So looking at their things here, so they've got, so they're going to pull up their cards into their hand. Let me just, so we have a rescue, escape, gift, okay, that's an interrupt, a palace, hidden, wolf, parent, and a key. Now, I'm just looking at the other player's cards, because what's going to happen is, as the one player is telling the story, the other players are going to listen for things which match the elements that they have in their hands. And if they have something that matches, then the player is able to interrupt and take over the story. Because remember, the point is to be trying to get the tell your story. I apologize for the glare on that one card there. I'm not dealing with professional studio situations here. So they escaped their captors and fled home. Okay. So I might start off the story then for this character, and I might for this player, and I might say, once upon a time there was a prince who was kept captive inside of a palace, and I play the palace card now. Now I put this one face up in front of everybody to show I've dealt with one of my cards. The prince was kept in the palace by an evil king. The evil king was not his father, but he had captured the prince from a neighboring kingdom and was holding him for ransom. Now, there was a princess who was coming to rescue the prince from the dungeon, and the other player then puts down their card here for prison. Now, I said dungeon, but dungeon, prison are obviously the same thing. So now, because this player has put a card down, because I said dungeon, so they're taking the prison, they are now able to take over the story. So then they continue the story with their cards, and they say, so the prison door was opened by the princess. She was very ugly, and so the prince didn't know what to make of her. But the princess had a secret that the prince didn't know. So they escaped, and so as they escaped, then this player comes back again and says, escape. So they'll put down the escape card. And so it's going to go back and forth until one player has got rid of all their cards. So the interrupt cards can be played for whatever their thing is. So it's here, it says like an item. So if they are talking about an item, so let's say the princess had a necklace, I can interrupt and say, okay, interrupt. And I can put that one down, item, necklace, matches. Now it also says at the bottom here, can also be played as a tree. So if they say anything about tree, I can play that card as a tree. So different ones will have different things. So this one is a place, so I can interrupt any place. So they could have interrupted even when they talked about the palace here. So I just try to play 3 players. It's a little hard for me to keep up there, but you're going to keep going with all of those until one player runs out of all their cards, and then is then able to say their thing. And so maybe the princess was actually the sister of the prince, and he had somehow cursed her, and she disguised herself to come and save him. Didn't want him to know because they were arguing, and so then they promised never to fight again, because that's what led to him being captured in the first place, kind of thing. You know, the story is going to weave itself as you go. You're just playing the cards and reacting to the cards that you have. Now, if at any point a player decides, I just don't know what to do anymore, I'm stuck, they can say pass, at which point they give up one of their cards and they take a new card, and then the play passes to another person. And if you're doing this in a classroom setting, I would suggest doing that as the teacher, just going around, and then when players pass, you give them the card, you take back a card. That way the card that was in that group can always be used in a different group. So that way you're just maximizing the use of all the cards that you have for the whole space. And that is how you play Once Upon a Time, the storytelling game. Okay, so I've talked a little bit already in the report card about the game and its usage. Like, I mean, this game really is a fantastic tool for building onto narratives and teaching kids about writing and getting past the writer's block, because it's a game, go, competition, a little bit of pressure, but in a fun way of trying to get your story elements and listening to other people and hearing what they're saying and just letting the ideas flow. Don't worry so much about the writing, don't worry so much about all those editings and things that have to go on with the thing. Just let the story come out. As I always say to parents when I'm talking to them about the writing and stuff, it's just, talk to the students about what they're doing, because to talk about your ideas and to share your ideas orally is far easier than writing it down. So getting the ideas out orally first about what kind of elements you're going to include and how they're going to all come together in a story, making a story based on what you have in your cards to then just tell that story, is just orally is going to be much easier than trying to write it down. And then writing it down could be the part after that, and that's going to, like I say, this is just going to sort of help launch that. Now, they're not going to have to write down everything they did here, because that might be a very long story and a very sort of convoluted story as it twists and turns between the different players' cards. But again, it just provides those ideas and gives the ideas of the elements. It gives the ideas of the way a narrative works, your beginning, your middle, your end. And try to lead a story to tie off at the end and everything. It's just, there's so much that can come out of this. I'm just kind of rambling at this point about the kinds of things that are in there, but like, look at the game, think about your class, how you set it up, and come up with the plans to introduce it and execute it and sort of use the tools from it with your students as they played it, and how do you then talk about it from that point. Like I said, with the cost and the way that you can use this for the whole class, is to me a definite recommend. So that is it for Once Upon a Time, a storytelling card game. If you like this, then please do remember to hit like and subscribe down below. It does help the channel. I do appreciate it. And if you have any other ideas for games you might like to see on the channel, then please let me know in the comment section below. Love to hear from the viewers, as it helps me to give you relevant content. If there's anything else you'd like me to talk about, be it about books or topics of discussion, then also let me know. I'm always happy to hear from you, the viewers. And that's going to wrap it up for today's episode. Until next time, I'm Craig Thompson-Wood, your host on Teaching with Board Games, saying thanks for coming to the classroom.
Are you coming back to school?